They say empaths are people who hear silence. Not their ears, their skin hears, their heart hears. You sit next to such a person, silent, and they already know the storm inside you. And not because they guess, they simply sense the vibrations of your hidden thoughts, as if someone turned on a radio at the frequency of your soul. Jung would say that an empath lives half in the collective unconscious. It's as if they constantly have their finger on the pulse of other people's shadows. They sense other people's tension, even if it's carefully hidden under a mask of calm. They don't need to delve into the details, they immediately get to the essence. But sometimes this is a curse, they know what would be better not to know. An empath is a person who tires of crowds faster than a phone from an old charger. Because every glance, every unspoken word, every regret from someone else is like downloading gigabytes of information. They leave a crowded room devastated, even though they said nothing. Simply because he's experienced the emotions of dozens of people at once. But the most interesting thing is his ability to notice micro-movements. Just as a dog senses an earthquake before humans, an empath senses mood swings before the owner of those emotions does. You don't even realize you've been affected by something, and he's already asking, "You're upset about something right now, right?" And at that moment, you want to ask, "Who are you? A psychic?" Empaths often grow out of pain. Their sensitivity is armor forged in childhood. When they had to read adults' moods in advance to avoid disaster. To anticipate danger before it manifests. This is how an internal radar is formed that can never be turned off. The irony is that it is trauma that gives them this gift. But sometimes an empath forgets about themselves. It's easier for them to experience someone else's emotion than to understand their own. They rescue, pull them out, smooth them over, but they don't notice how they're drowning. And so they sit in the middle of the night, squeezed, exhausted, but still thinking about how not to upset anyone. Although it's high time to ask themselves, what do I feel? Empaths often choose relationships where their abilities are comfortable. Where they understand everything, forgive everything, accept everything. Because they sense that the person is hurting, and they stay. Even when they should leave. But one day comes the moment when an empath understands, empathy is not an obligation, but a choice. And that it is possible to love someone without destroying yourself. The most powerful trigger for an empath is coldness. A sharp emotional break, a sudden distance. They begin to look within themselves for the cause, although it is not there. It is difficult for an empath to believe that some people simply do not know how to feel so deeply. And this is not a betrayal, just a different way of being. But empaths have a unique power. They can see in others what they are afraid to acknowledge in themselves. They can illuminate the shadow that Jung considered the main path to wholeness. And when an empath says, "I sense that you are not angry now, but afraid," the world within the other person suddenly becomes more honest. And yet, empathy is not an illness, not a burden, not a weakness. It is a rare ability to sense the world not through words, but through awareness. It is the ability to be a conduit of light, even if you yourself sometimes walk in the dark. It is the ability to notice subtle vibrations of reality that others miss. And most importantly, it is the path to true intimacy, when two souls meet without masks. An empath sometimes wonders why they feel so strongly about people they barely know. It's as if a fine tuner lives within them, an old master who can hear the soul in the vibration of a voice, in the flutter of an eyelash, in the way a person puts a period at the end of a message. And this tuner is rarely wrong, even if the empath prefers not to believe it. The shadow that Jung spoke of is almost a home for an empath. They know how to enter it quietly, as if into a room where someone is sleeping. They carefully touch on topics that others avoid. But this gentleness is not weakness. It is like the hand of a surgeon who knows that any sudden movement is painful. But if you do everything precisely, you can save it. Empaths have a strange peculiarity. They often fall in love not with people, but with their potential. With what a person can become if they stop fearing their own shadows. They sense the light that has not yet been kindled, and the warmth that a person is still hiding. That's why it's easy to grow next to an empath, but hard to lie to yourself. An empath rarely says, "I'm hurt." They're more likely to ask, "Are you okay?" even if they haven't slept for days. And this isn't an attempt to be nice, it's the reaction of a soul that feels someone else's pain louder than its own. Sometimes it's beautiful, but sometimes it's destructive. After all, no one is meant to be an eternal container for others' emotions. There's another secret. Empaths are masters of pretending strength. They laugh when there's a storm inside. They say, "Everything's fine," even though they've long since burned out. And only the most observant notice that their eyes become deeper than usual at these moments. As if the person is looking at you from afar, from a place where they're simply trying to survive. But the day comes when an empath learns to say honestly, "I'm struggling." And that moment is like turning on a light in a room that's been dark for so long. They understand, strength doesn't come from keeping everything inside. Strength comes from honesty, from boundaries, from the ability to protect one's vulnerable spots so as not to turn empathy into self-destruction. An empath who has learned to set boundaries becomes a different person. Calmer, deeper, even clearer. They no longer try to save everyone. They choose who to give their warmth to, and who to give only a polite distance to. And this isn't cruelty. It's adult self-love. The most amazing thing is when an empath stops being afraid of their sensitivity. Triggers no longer make them hostage. They feel, and don't drown. They empathize, and don't dissolve. They help, but don't forget to live their own life. Their gift ceases to be a heavy cross and becomes a compass. The world doesn't need empaths to save everyone. And to remind people, emotions are not enemies. That feeling is safe. That intimacy is possible. That a shadow is not a monster, but a door. And that when someone truly sees you, a silence is born inside, like home. And yet, the most important thing about empaths is not their ability to understand others, but how they one day begin to understand themselves. When their inner tenderness ceases to be a weakness. When they stop looking for their reflection in the eyes of others. When they first say to the world, "I feel deeply, and this is my path." At this moment, an empath becomes not a vessel for other people's emotions, but a conduit for their own power. And this is the beginning of true freedom. If these words resonate with your inner shadow or light, support the channel by subscribing or sending a warm message. Your response is the energy that helps me create new stories for those who hear more deeply. There are moments when an empath seems to fall out of reality. They catch someone else's emotion, hold it in their hands like a thin glass, and forget that they too have a life. They can stand among people, laughing and loud, and feel as if they are underwater. Not detachment, overload. A gentle burnout that no one notices. Empaths are incredible listeners. But sometimes they just want someone to hear them. Not to analyze, not to expect a wise conclusion, not to rely on them like a lifeline, but simply to say, "I'm here. You can be yourself." So simple, yet somehow so rare. Jung said that a person grows when they meet their shadow. An empath, on the other hand, meets other people's shadows every day. But they are afraid of their own. Their own pain seems too loud, too awkward, too inconvenient. They are used to being a quiet home for everyone, but not used to someone being a home for them. Sometimes an empath notices, those they helped most often disappear. Easily. Without explanation. While he was healing their wounds, they moved on, healed, renewed. And he was left with a void that no one returned. It's painful, but it's important to understand, he wasn't rejected. He simply gave people more than he should have. But there's something else, something surprisingly bright. Sometimes an empath meets someone who feels subtly, almost in the same way. Their conversations are like music, quieter, deeper, more honest. There's no need to pretend strength. No need to explain hints. One look is enough, and everything is clear. Such encounters are rare, but they are what give empaths the strength to live. An empath can read more than just emotions. They sense hidden meaning. A word for them isn't just a sound, it's an entire universe. Sometimes they're told, "You're digging too deep." But they simply see what others are hiding: pain behind sarcasm, loneliness behind courage, fear behind aggression. They don't blame, they understand. That's their strength. But understanding isn't love. An empath too often confuses one with the other. They think, if I understand you, then we're on the same path. But sometimes a person doesn't want to be understood at all. Sometimes they're only willing to take without giving. Sometimes they're afraid of honest connection. And then the empath needs to do what's hardest for them: let go. No one teaches empaths how to recover. They know how to heal others, but they don't know how to heal themselves. But one day they begin to remember simple things: silence is also medicine. Clean air. A long walk. People who make you feel calm. Conscious solitude that doesn't hurt, but fills you up. Empathy directed inward. And there's a profound paradox: the better an empath understands their boundaries, the more effective their gift becomes. They begin to feel more clearly, more accurately, more deeply, but without self-destruction. It's as if their soul X-ray has finally been calibrated. Now they see not everything, but only what's truly important. And ultimately, the empath comes to a simple, liberating understanding: their sensitivity is not a mission, not a karmic debt, not a cross. It's simply a quality of the soul. Like an artist seeing colors, like a musician hearing melody, like a child believing in miracles. And when they stop fighting this, real life begins. Their own, not lived through others. Sometimes an empath catches themselves thinking they've spent too much time in other people's stories. They've worried, analyzed, supported, and suddenly they realize their own life has quietly faded into the shadows. And then they take the first step back. Carefully. Awkwardly. But firmly. This is a moment not of selfishness, but of maturation. The moment when they begin to reclaim their true self. Empaths find it difficult to be angry. Anger is a frightening energy for them, like an uncontrolled fire. But one day they learn to hear it not as destruction, but as a signal. "These are my boundaries," says this fire. "This is my value." And when an empath stops suppressing their anger in advance, their voice becomes stronger, clearer, and for the first time, truly theirs. Empaths have an amazing ability to see two versions of a person: the one they show the world, and the one that lives in their shadow. But now they know, you can't love a shadow more than you love your real self. You can't live in anticipation of someone opening up. You can only walk alongside those who walk alongside you now. At some point, an empath notices they've suddenly become calmer. People still open up to them, but they no longer dissolve. They hear emotions, but they don't carry them around for days. They walk through the crowd, and emerge the same, not empty. This is a new stage, when sensitivity remains, but doesn't control them, but serves them. They learn to choose, to whom to give their depth, to whom just a slight smile, and to whom it's better to give distance altogether. And this isn't about coldness. It's about wisdom. The empath suddenly understands that their attention is valuable. And that not everyone knows how to handle subtle souls with care. An empath who has dealt with their shadow side becomes amazingly whole. They are no longer afraid of other people's emotions because they have stopped fearing their own. They see tension, hear pain, sense lies, but they react to everything not from a wound, but from an inner peace. The silence within becomes their home. And it is at this moment that people begin to gravitate toward them even more strongly. Because an empath with boundaries is a rarity. They don't dissolve, don't impose, don't save. They are simply present, consciously, gently, sincerely. It's somehow easier to breathe with such a person. As if they create a space in which you can be yourself. But they already know, they don't have to be a safe haven for everyone. They choose their connections. They look deeply at a person, but not deeper than the person is ready to be seen. And for the first time, this makes the relationship honest. Mutual. The warmth becomes mutual, not a flow from one soul to another. The empath finally begins to live for themselves. Not in selfishness, but in balance. He makes choices that sustain his energy. He hears his desires, his needs, his true wants. And the more he follows his path, the brighter his gift becomes, purified, mature, powerful. And then one morning he wakes up, looks at the world, and understands a simple, almost piercing truth: empathy is not what makes him vulnerable. It is what makes him alive. He no longer fears his own depth. He no longer hides from others' emotions. He no longer gives himself to those who take without measure. He stands on the threshold of his own life, whole, gentle, honest. He feels the world, but he also feels himself. And this is not the end of his story, it is its beginning. The beginning of a life in which his heart is no longer an instrument for saving others, but a compass that guides him. To a place where there is no fear of shadows. Where there is no pain from others' expectations. Where sensitivity is not weakness, but light. A light that no longer blinds him, but illuminates the path. Comment below: empathy isn't what makes you vulnerable. It's what makes you alive. Support the channel with likes and subscriptions. Thanks for watching.